Thank you, and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to this special edition of EWTN Live. This is our 30th anniversary program, and we're going to go for 90 minutes instead of our usual 60, and talk to a variety of people who are very important in EWTN, both in backstage and as well as on stage. To begin with tonight, I'd like to introduce two of our fearless leaders. The first, of course, is Michael Warsaw, who's the president and CEO, and secondly, Doug Keck. So please welcome them both here, too. Doug Keck is the vice president for production and runs Herd on me and others like me.
Actually, Doug was promoted. He's the executive vice president. Chief operating officer of the network.
There you go.
Mitch has yet to acknowledge that.
Right. Apparently, we see that. We see that.
Just my attempt to keep a low profile.
That's right. See, I have a question for you though,
yes,
before you even start. In that, why has it taken 30 years for you to have me on your show?
Because there's a committee that chooses the guests.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And you keep taking your name off the list.
I chair that committee, don't I?
Yes, you do.
Oh, okay. All right.
Why,
okay.
And I trust your judgment.
That's right.
Well, I am very wise on those matters.
So, tell us, first of all, let's start with you, Michael. You are the president and CEO. What is it that you do at the network?
Sure. My role is really to be responsible for the general direction of the network, the general strategic direction of the network, and to oversee all of our operations, plans, initiatives, relationships, domestically and globally, really. So the general direction of EWTN and its activities.
When you talk about a general direction, what would you see as that general direction? What is the way in which we're headed,
sure,
as you see it?
Sure. Well, I think, first and foremost, the mission of EWTN and the mission statement of EWTN guides all of our activities. The essential portion of that really is the network exists for the advancement of truth as defined by the magisterium of the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, that's the mission statement and the mission that Mother set out on 30 years ago. And that mission remains unchanged from that first day. And so much of my responsibility is really to see that we stay true to that mission that Mother Angelica set out, and to work with Doug primarily, and the rest of our staff and our board, and all of the stakeholders really in the network, in expanding that and really using the media, using all facets of technology to carry out that mission that Mother Angelica defined so many years ago.
Yeah. And Doug, you have a different position. What is it that you yourself do?
I spend my time keeping an eye on you. That takes up about 90% of my time.
And for the other 10%,
the other 10%, well, I guess, and again, maybe on a lower level and kind of the more mundane day-to-day operations and part of the idea of helping to deliver on the vision that Mother had and that Michael's talking about. And again, my background is not someone who was, in the church per se. I was a Catholic, but, my background is television and radio. And so hopefully I try to use those gifts that I believe I was given to maximize, I think, everything Mother Angelica wanted to do and that Michael and the board's vision is. And I think that's why we're really, that whole idea of the EWTN everywhere, the idea of getting out the truth of the Catholic Church in any different form we can get it on the internet, the web, Twitter, whatever, in all different bite-sized pieces, long-form pieces, because people learn and understand in different ways. And really, it's just really a wonderful experience to be able to work with the great staff that we have at EWTN. In fact, one of our, Peter Gagnon, I'll just say, who we talked about earlier, who's ill, And right now we reach out to him and pray for him. He's got some good news, and we hope that continues. But he's, you know, one of the major players at EWTN, but there's so many others that we were blessed to have come. And I think, you know, Mother Angelica always looked at it in a sense, the idea that, you know, the right person would show up, whether it was Bill Steltemeyer that day showing up, or Father Mitch showing up, or you showing up, and hopefully in some small way for me to show up even, you know. But so that it's really exciting, and we're trying to deal with all the different aspects of the media and support the work of the church.
And you know, and I think it's both a very challenging time for the network. It's a very challenging time for the church. It's a very challenging time for people of faith. The culture is at war with people of faith and the values of people of faith, and it's certainly at war with the church and its teachings. So in that respect, it's a very challenging time, but I think it's also a very exciting time. You know, I think from day one, Mother Angelica understood that EWTN needed to embrace every facet of technology to execute its mission. And I think that's one of the things that makes what we do, you know, so exciting. And as Doug mentioned, and you've heard a lot throughout today and will throughout the weekend, this idea of EWTN is everywhere. It's an amazing time in the media world, and media is changing. Traditional television is changing. There's so many more opportunities for people to get content. And there are many, many people out there in the secular media world who are pushing a lot of content with their agenda, and that's very harmful. And I think we have to be the antidote to that. We have to be available everywhere, in every space, in every technology, with the message of the gospel as the antidote to what else is out there.
Yeah, yeah. You know, this sense of being over against the culture was not quite as strong in the earliest days. I think we had a sense in the early days that it was much more benign. Mm-hmm. But the heat has been increased in terms of the antagonism from the culture to faith in general, faith in God, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, and then faith specifically as Catholic. And we're trying to stand up and say, no, we are going to be very Catholic, right, and stand up for that.
Exactly, and I think just to follow up earlier about the idea of people coming to the network, I think, you know, Raymond Arroyo coming to work at the network and having his expertise and background in news and in dealing with the culture, or a Marcus Grodi who'll be on later, you know, him coming to the network and Mother seeing in him the opportunity to reach out to our Protestant brothers and sisters. So again, it's an incredible lineup of people that the Lord has brought to work at EWTN that makes it possible for us to reach as many people as possible. But like you said, the major thing for us is always to stay true to the truth. And I always remember Mother, you know, a lot of us would say, and people would think, gee, Mother, when you're not here, what's going to happen? Right. And you know, she said, well, if the Lord wants it to go on, it'll go on. And if he doesn't, it won't. And I have to admit, for some of us at the time, from a job security position, it was kind of like, oh, okay. Isn't there a plan B or something you got there, Mother?
Come see, come saw. You know?
Maybe you got another book, but it you know, it really is that. But it's only going to work if we stay true to the mission.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one of the things too, you know, on that particular point, I think Mother had great confidence in the people that you know, she had chosen and who were involved, and I say that in all humility. But it you know, the key leaders of EWTN now, the next generation in a sense that's stepping up, are all people that worked with Mother directly. Both Doug and I for, you know, many, many years, you know, had the capacity, the honor to work with Mother on a daily basis, and really to be in a position to be the one who was able to execute many of her visions, her desires for the expansion of the network and the growth of the network in certain areas. So
that's something else. We've got only a couple minutes left, but I'd like you to address, too, how widely EWTN has expanded globally. Mm-hmm. This has been one of the big parts of the story. When I started working at EWTN, we were on 4 hours a day.
Right.
And with only a few 100,000 people.
Well, now you're on 4 hours a day. So,
yes.
And just by yourself. So.
The fun just doesn't stop.
That's why we had to expand.
We couldn't have one channel to contain you. It took that expansion. No, I think it's I think that's that's part of the miracle that is EWTN. When you look back and say in 1981, when Mother flipped that switch, EWTN was 4 hours a day in 60,000 homes, mostly here regionally. Today, EWTN, as I had mentioned earlier in the day, we operate 9 separate television networks that exist in English, Spanish, French, German. We'll be turning up our 10th television network later this year, which is a 24/7 service in German for the German-speaking region of the world. All of that's in some 160 million television households. On the radio side, EWTN shortwave service is the largest shortwave radio service in the world. And we hear, for example, from Cuba, just what an immense impact the shortwave radio service continues to have on a daily basis in Cuba and elsewhere around the world. AM and FM radio, EWTN is the largest programmer of AM and FM radio content in the United States and one of the largest globally. Satellite radio, we have our satellite services in the US and Canada. And then when you look at the internet, our website has somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 4 million unique visitors a month. 3.5 to 4 million unique visitors. That's unique people who are coming to our website from every corner of the globe.
Right.
Who are accessing Catholic content of all sorts from our website. All of these, the new digital media, the new technologies, phones. If I can pull out my cell phone and we could watch EWTN right now on the cell phone. The reach of EWTN is absolutely tremendous. And to add to that, earlier in the year, with the acquisition of the National Catholic Register, to bring sort of that print dimension into it, has again expanded EWTN into another area.
Well, that makes me think also, just in what you're talking about, that is, remember when I first came down and up at the radio, there was kind of like the idea of spreading the word over the world, and Mother always had this kind of almost an image of like, by sending up via satellite, we're spreading the truth globally and impacting all these people in a way, and that's really what's coming to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the impact of it too. I think I have seen and become very much aware of the multiplier effect. In the sense that you have Mother Angelica, who 30 years ago said yes to this inspiration, this prompting of the Lord to found this network and to move forward. And as the years have gone on and the network has impacted people's lives, what that has meant. I became aware of the story of a 10-year-old boy who watched the EWTN coverage of the March for Life and the West Coast March for Life with his mother, became so convinced of the importance of the pro-life message as a result of that he went out and he started a pro-life ministry in his own area. This is a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
How many priests do we know?
Right.
I can think of many who will tell you they attribute their vocation to the priesthood, to EWTN and to Mother in some way. It's amazing.
The impact has been truly amazing, and I don't think that it's going to end for a long time to come. We have to break at this point, so we'll be back in just a couple minutes, so please stay with us. welcome back. Welcome back. We're here with a new set of guests. As a matter of fact, these are all hosts of radio programs. And we'd like to talk a little bit about EWTN Radio, this segment. First of all, many of you may not know him because he's not on the televisions as much, but Colin Donovan hosts one of the online programs. Then, of course, you know Johnette Benkovich, who does radio and television, John Martinoni, who does radio, and Joan Lewis, who's also on radio. And do you do any television?
I do Joan's Rome.
Oh, there you go, there you go.
And I do papal events.
Papal events. I was thinking of a regular series, but you do Joan's Rome.
No, not a regular series.
Right. So most of us are on, and Colin is on television sometimes, but more on radio. Now, EWTN Radio is a relatively new aspect compared to the television. You know, we only started radio in the 90s. How did you first get to do a radio program?
Well, it was back before there were any AM and FM stations associated with EWTN when we had the old Livewire program up at radio. And
when you say we have at radio, what do you mean by that?
Well, the shortwave radio station, that's all that EWTN had in those days was shortwave, and they had a call-in question and answer program, essentially a precursor of open line. And there was Father McCarthy, who was a local priest, and myself, and Father Hederman and others who sort of went up there and did different turns at it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Johnette, how long have you been doing radio?
Well, I actually began evangelizing through radio, Father Mitch, back in 1987. Our diocese has a radio station there, and I started there. And when EWTN Radio began, we were able to send that program up, and EWTN began to play it. And then eventually, we just transferred everything through EWTN. So, yes, we've been around a long time. At that time, in 1987, there were only 7 radio stations in the United States of America. And of the 7, only 2 of them were being used for evangelization purposes. The rest were easy listening stations. So I think it's been phenomenal and exciting to watch the growth of Catholic radio happen through EWTN. And I think that that's a tremendous legacy that Mother has left.
It really is. John, how about you?
Well, I actually got started in radio doing a Catholic apologetics program on the largest evangelical radio station in the state of Alabama, and that was in the late 90s. I did that for a year, and I was away from it for a couple of years.
How did you get started doing a Catholic apologetics program on a Protestant radio station?
Is it a bet?
That's a long story, but the short of it is that they played one day, I just happened to listen one day, they were playing a very virulent anti-Catholic program, and I called to complain, and I told them, I said, you need to allow a Catholic to come on to answer those spurious charges against the Catholic Church, and I didn't mean this Catholic. But that's the way it worked out. I went on for one show that I thought, but they got so many calls after that, and I started getting calls, and somebody said, well, I'll buy airtime if you'll go on and do something like that. And I resisted for 7 months. I said, God, this is so ridiculous, I'm not even going to pray about it. If you want it to happen, you make it happen. And about 7 or 8 months later, I was in there signing a contract to do a one-year show. And I did that for a year, and I had so many things going on in my life that I had to stop at the end of a year. But a few years later, within about a month's period, I had maybe 4 or 5 people, all independent of each other, say, John, you need to get that radio show back on the air. And so as I usually do, I ignored it for a while and then started praying about it. And the 4th or 5th person, I said, okay, I'll look into getting back on the radio. And I had written down in my pocket calendar, which is my second memory, call Friday morning, call the radio station to look at buying airtime. And that Thursday afternoon before that Friday when I was going to call the radio station, I get a call from Tom Price at EWTN Radio. He said, you need to call Doug Keck. I said, why? He said, you just need to call Doug Keck. I said, well, give me a hint. He said, just call him. I said, okay, I'll call. So I called Doug Keck. He said, John, we're looking at doing a series of programs, open line programs, a different host each day of the week, Monday through Friday. And I know you had done this program before, something similar to what we're planning on evangelical radio. Would you be open to considering doing it here? So I was like, okay, well, I guess I am supposed to be back on radio, but just not the evangelical radio.
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because that was exactly how I got started in the media too. I heard an anti-Catholic radio show on a Protestant radio station in Nashville, Tennessee, back in 1983. And I called to complain, the same as you. And they had me on a live radio show, and they kept having me back. And eventually some Catholics got money up for me to do my own radio show on the Protestant radio station.
The evangelical station never asked me back.
You know that you bring that up, that's true for me too. Joan, how about you?
Well, my first start in radio came at Vatican Radio. I was working for the Vatican at the time at the press office, Vatican Information Service, and in probably 1995, they were doing a series of programs. The English language program was doing a weekly live show every day at 12:15, and they wanted the different continents represented. So they had Australia, they had North America, the English-speaking continents, and they asked me to do a show on the Vatican news in English. So it wasn't so much a continent as it was just the Vatican news. And then when the Jubilee year came along, they had a fascinating, they set up a program called 105 Live. And it was a combination of 3 languages at a time. You could bring your little portable radio to Rome for the Jubilee and tune in to 105 FM live and listen to Vatican radio, but in different languages. So 3 of us would be in a studio, and we'd have Italian and Spanish and English, but you had to know the other languages, because Jeanette would say something in Italian, and then I would answer in English to her, and then the Spaniard would come in. So it
sounds confusing.
It wasn't confusing certainly to us, because we knew all the languages. But to the people in the street, a lot of them actually being Europeans, they had many languages.
Sure.
They had 2, they usually had 3, they had their mother tongue and 1 or 2 others, you know. And then after the Jubilee year, they kept the name 105 Live. It's mostly Italian now, but there's English news, and I have a show called Joan Knows. And it got the name because originally it was, I would report on a summary of the week's news, the papal events, and then at the very end answer a question somebody would email in. And when the website disappeared, Father Lombardi, now head of Vatican Radio, changed the parameters for websites. So we had a very colorful, wonderful website and pictures and email Joan a question at, and that all disappeared. And actually the questions did, even though I would say, email me at, because it was so easy, joanknows@gmail.com. And I still have it, folks, so still have the email. And then with EWTN, when I was asked to be bureau chief in 2005, I was asked to do a blog, weekly radio show. They came in increments as I was learning all the technical aspects of things, because I do the shows in my own, you know, studio/office in Rome and edit them there and everything else. So do the news shows every day, just very brief, 4 or 5, 2, 3 news links, weekend radio show, Vatican Insider, and then the blog is the other part of my life.
Okay.
So
all of us have been involved in radio for a number of years. And the thing that I would want to ask each one of you again, especially those of you who are on television as well, what is some of the impact that you sense from radio as distinct from the television? Because that's the 2 different animals, and there's a different response. Johnette, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to start. I think that they're very different mediums, obviously, you know, and I think that each one of them has the capacity to impact tremendously in a person's life. Radio has a quality that sometimes is missed a wee bit in television, and that is that radio has that element of intimacy. And people, I don't know if it's because of the anonymity that exists, you know, with the person who's the host. They don't see the face. But there's a comfort level that seems to develop with a radio listenership that I think is very important. And for me, doing radio every day has been a wonderful opportunity to be able to share from my heart, to encourage people, to inspire people, hopefully, but also to receive back from them. And I like that. I like this ability to have this holy conversation, we call it on Women of Grace Live, you know. We're going to have holy conversation together today. And this give and take and this sharing of the heart that happens through radio, especially live radio, I think is very, very unique. Television, I adore television. I love it. I love having guests on. I love to do the interviews, you know, and I just enjoy everything that goes with that. But both means of evangelization today are so essential.
Right.
So very important. And if I could just say, you know, based on something that Michael said, and then I think that Doug summed it up beautifully too, you know, the need that there is to be able to be everywhere with EWTN right now, the need that there is to be able to have an influence in the culture of the day. You know, I think that God in his omniscience and his divine providence, knowing what we were going to face as a people at the beginning of this 21st century, and as we saw it unwinding at the end of the 20th, knew that this network was going to be essential. And he's raised it up for now. And to have an opportunity to participate in that is beyond belief. And each one of us, I think, is called to be an evangelizer. So yes, certainly all of us sitting up here through radio, but every person watching at home, every person that's sitting here with us today, we're all called to evangelize. And if the believer is not about the business of doing that, who's going to do it? It's up to us.
It won't be the atheist.
It's not going to be. It's not going to be the secularists, you know? So it's got to be us. And we got to get going, right? Get going.
Preach it, sister.
I'm going for it, right?
Colin, how about you?
Well, I think Jonette mentioned something that almost anybody who does radio mentions, and that is the intimacy of it, that you really do have a sense, whether you're a passive listener yourself, driving in your car or at home, you know, that you're there with the host, with the person you're talking to. And I think one of the things that is able to accomplish is, and you perhaps have this experience too as having been a priest, and that is that you have a real sense of almost a pastoral relationship with the person you're trying to help. Yeah. Especially if it's a deeply personal matter, a marriage issue or a family issue or something like that, or a matter of morality where they're trying to straighten out in their life. So I think that ability to reach the person and touch them at that level and help them, hopefully it's being helpful to them, but it's also something I think that's very satisfying to the person answering the question. And you don't seem to get that on television. Certainly you do get the calling questions, that's one thing, but it seems more, even though in a way radio is more disembodied as a media, the reaction doesn't seem disembodied as it sometimes does on television.
I think it's because radio reminds people of the telephone. You know, that you have this interaction between the host and me. And I am talking to the host myself, even though there are a few million people listening. That doesn't seem to matter so much. Whereas in television, the whole room is there listening because a television fills that space in a way that radio doesn't. Joan, you wanted to say something.
Well, just being based in Rome seems to make a huge difference to a lot of my listeners. I think some of them assume that on Mondays, Benedict and I dine together and I get all of the inside dope, you know.
How often do you dine with Pope Benedict?
Well, it's a little bit more than that, so no. I wish. Just to get to meet him is a pleasure and a joy, and I have had that experience many times. But what I've noticed that in Rome, being based in Rome, reporting basically that news, the Vatican news, the international church. I, have been to the Middle East and Iraq and everything, and I also concentrate a great deal on stories from those churches. And the people listen to me through the means we were talking about earlier, and Michael was, they listen not just on the radio, in their home or in their car, and they will use podcasts. They're listening on their computer at the office. I can get mail from somebody in Vietnam who listened to my show. They understand English. They listened to my show on the computer, as they could, yours. But again, I get a huge amount of input because of where I'm based. So it's a universal church. I'm right there at the beating heart of the church.
John?
Well, the big difference for me, and I've only been on TV a few times as a guest on some of the shows, but the big difference for me between radio and TV is that on the radio, apparently, I sound like I have hair.
I can't wait to listen to your voice.
I don't know how many times people have come up to me when I've gone to speak somewhere around the United States. They say, "Oh, that's what I thought you had hair." I don't really know how to respond to that, but from the radio aspect, the same thing they've said. There's an intimacy there. I've had people who come up and they talk to you like you've known them for years. They've known you for years, and sometimes there's too much information shared. But again, it's people who, because of the medium, something about the medium, probably because of what you were saying, there's this intimacy, and they just think you're part of the family, and they treat you like part of the family.
Yeah, that's very much part of it too, because you do get to share a little intimacy. We are running out of time for this segment, but I'd like to go to some question and answers and open up to some people who have lined up to ask questions. Let's start out with this gentleman here. Sir, where are you from?
I'm from St. Louis. My name is Paul, and I listen to Catholic radio every single day. And I have to say that you all do a fabulous job. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And when I'm listening, especially to the call-in shows like Open Line, it sounds so smooth and so well. I was just curious, how much preparation time do you usually take before the shows in order to prepare?
How much do you prepare for Open Line?
Well, I heard your answer earlier on the interview, and the questions are always changing. There's not really what you can prepare. Now, I've been doing a little liturgy segment as we get towards the implementation of the missal. So I do a little preparation of that, or if there's a news item, I may outline something, a response to the battle in the culture or something like that, and how we as Christians should respond, especially Catholic morality applies to that. But the questions are so varied and interesting, you can't really prepare for that in advance.
As a matter of fact, the way I prepare is I usually say the noon mass, and then I eat lunch. Lunch is my preparation.
Well, and that's, for me, I have about a 25-minute drive from my office to the studio, and I just pray the whole time. You're praying, Holy Spirit, because it is a great responsibility that you give accurate information about the faith, and that's why, prayer, to me, is paramount.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, Paul. Ma'am, where are you from?
My name is Lucy. I'm from Connecticut.
Great.
And I have a question for Jeanette, but I'll put it to anybody in the panel. In this day and age, we live in a culture where expertise, specialist is, praised. Does anybody here have a background in, psychology or in counseling to be able to give this advice? I know Dr. Ray Grundy says if you're a parent, you're the best person for your children to educate them. I'm just curious because I know Women of Grace really does affect me, especially in this culture of radical feminism. And I really do rely on her show a lot more recently than before. And I want to thank her. But for anybody in the panel, do you feel that your Christian background is basically what you pull upon, or do you have an education or sociology or psychology background or that you pull on, or what have you?
Janet?
Yes, I'll answer your question. No, actually not. I was an English teacher for a number of years, and then I was an insurance saleswoman for a number of years. But, you know, what we are called to be as Catholics is an individual who is always studying the faith. If we're going to have a personal relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ, it has got to begin with prayer, and that prayer has got to be furthered by our study of the faith, coming to know it, to understand it. And it's a tremendous gift that we have in our Catholic faith, because when you have that relationship with our Lord and you enter into a true pursuit of all that Holy Mother Church has given us over these 2,000 years, you find that there is very few questions or very few situations that there's not an answer for within the confines of the faith. You look at St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, you know, and you might refer to him almost as the first psychologist because of his study of the human person and his knowledge about the emotions of the human person. But we're blessed too on our television program because we're able to bring in experts to fill in that void and to bring us the truths of the faith through the lens of a particular discipline, and that's quite helpful.
Do any of the rest of you hosts have a degree in psychology or sociology or even in radio and communications?
I have a degree in finance and an MBA, but...
I don't, but you know, jumping off with something John said, and I think that you can overestimate the host's capacity to be able to answer that question. I think we've all had the experience of your question is asked and you think, my God, how am I going to answer that? And then the words come to you because grace plays a big part of it. Mother always said, you know, you've probably heard this line about the apostles, that these ninnies couldn't even catch fish without help. Well, you're looking at 4 ninnies who could catch fish without help, and the Lord is there to help us, and I think that's where the credit is due.
Well, and one thing to add on to that is I always, maybe not always, but most of the time when someone calls in with a very personal question and they're going through a rough period in their life and they need counsel, good advice, I give them what I can, and I always tell them, go see the priest. Go to your parish priest, go find a priest and talk to him about this.
Oh, by the way, just a little side point. I noticed over the years, the 27 years I've been around, that Mother Angelica called the apostles ninnies a lot less often the closer she gets to meeting them. We have one more question.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Where are you from?
I'm from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. My name is Nick Keppel. I have a question. I feel like, this is to anyone, I feel like I've been formed in the truth by you guys, like just listening to you, and I've learned so much. But how do we reach those people who maybe aren't listening to the radio or watching the TV station, even within our own families, like fallen away Catholics or Protestants?
Any of you want to take that?
Well, apologetics is what I do, and I always tell people, if you can't answer a question, then you get into their hands a CD, you reach them with an MP3 download, tell them where they can go. And that's one of the things about radio and EWTN TV is so many, there's a direct effect, you listening to the radio or hearing it on the TV, but there's an indirect effect in that through radio and TV, apostolates like John Etz, like mine, the Bible Christian Society, and many others, Marcus Grodi's, Father Pavone's, they are able to be known by more people, and they are able to grow and have a greater influence as an indirect effect of what's going on through radio and TV. But I always say, I've got, you know, I'll put in a plug, I've got a talk, it's called Apologetics for the Scripturally Challenged. It teaches people how to engage folks in discussions about the faith, even if you may not even know where Genesis is in the Bible. I teach you how you can go and just with common knowledge, basic logic, and common sense, talk to somebody about the faith. And really what it is it's asking questions. Catholics all the time are answering questions about their faith. We're always on the defensive. I say, well, you need to be offensive without being offensive. And you do that by asking questions. You know, where in the Bible does it say anything about Mary being assumed into heaven? Well, where in the Bible does it say she wasn't?
Right.
You know, things like that.
I'm afraid that we need to take a break, but I want to thank you all for being part of this. It's great to have you, especially with your experience in radio. And we'll come back in just a couple minutes, so please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back. We're here with more of our hosts from EWTN, and we'd love to have you join us as we interview them. First of all, you know Janet Moreno. She works with Father Frank Pavone, you know, and pushing the issues for life. And of course, Father Mark. Father Mark Mary does the work, great work on the Life on the Rock program. And what I'd like to do is talk about some of the special interests that you represent. You know, the issues of life and the issues of youth. So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, how long have you two been making programs at EWTN?
Well, I came down here first in 1993 when I first became National Director of Priests for Life full-time. Met with Mother Angelica, and she said, you ought to do a series on abortion. She picked up the phone, talked to one of the producers. Before you know it, we were taping the series, and we've been doing it ever since. So it's been some 18 years. 18 years. Have you been working with Father Frank that whole time?
Oh, yes. Actually, I've been assisting Father Pavone since he was ordained by John Cardinal O'Connor. He came to my parish in Staten Island, New York, back in November of 1988. So I did pro-life work with him as a parish priest, and then when he went on to Priest for Life, assisted behind the scenes for many years. I helped with the programming, lining up the guests and prepping them for the shows. But then at the dawn of the millennium in 2000, they started using me on the program. And I always remember, Father Mitch, the very first live show I did with you, I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest.
Oh no, was I that mean?
No, I just was so frightened by the camera. And you know, now I feel more relaxed and at ease. And I just discovered that I'm so passionate about getting the issue out about pro-life that the nervousness kind of went away really quickly, and I attribute it to the Holy Spirit. Because people say to me all the time, well, Janet, do you have a degree? I know the previous segment talking about degrees. No, I don't have a degree in communications. However, I was a public school teacher in New York City, so I guess as they say, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Yeah. But I really think it's the Holy Spirit and my passion for kind of like, as I think you know, I was a good girl, a bad girl turned good. I was away from the church for 20 years. You know, Teresa Tomeo and I kind of talk about that quite a bit on radio. And I think it's the passion of realizing what I threw away for so many years and coming back and being passionate about this kind of has helped my nerves and really helped me to want to bring the truth to help others. And Father Mark, how long have you been with the Friars?
I joined the Friars in 1994. I was ordained a priest in 2003.
2003. Mm-hmm. And how long have you been doing programs?
Well, in front of the camera, I guess, just with Life on the Rock here, about 3 years.
3 years.
Did some floor directing with Life on the Rock in the Jeff Cavins days and odd jobs and things for the show. Yeah, yeah.
And again, the three of you reach very specific audiences. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about those audiences. Father Frank, what has been your sense of the results or the impact of doing these programs on EWTN?
Well, first of all, you know, as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of this network, we need to reflect on the fact that with 50 million abortions in the world every year, it is without a doubt true to say that this network has saved millions of human lives. Human lives who, were they not saved from being killed in the womb, would never have been able to hear the gospel or the beauty of the faith, as we've been talking about all evening. This network is saving lives. And we see that feedback every day, and we've been privileged to meet, and I've been privileged to baptize some of those who have been saved. It is galvanizing the pro-life movement because the church has identified this issue of the right to life as fundamental to every other right, as obviously essential, because if we don't have life, we don't have anything else. And this network, as distinct from so many self-proclaimed religious networks of all various kinds who are afraid to touch the hot potato of abortion, this network, thanks to Mother's leadership, has been fearless from day one. And it has given us and many others the opportunity not only to speak the truth about abortion, but I want to say, consistent with our philosophy that people will not reject abortion until they see abortion, I want to thank EWTN for having the courage to show people the reality of what abortion looks like. And that's one of the things that has helped to save so many lives.
Yeah. Janet, you're not only working with Priests for Life, but you're also doing this program for women who have had abortions.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that and the impact that you sense from the network.
Well, basically, it's the Silent No More Awareness campaign, which is women who've gone through healing and men writing their testimonies. We have them online. But the network has been marvelous, both through our programming and also your other programs, because I know Father Mark had us on, some of the ladies giving their testimonies even on Life on the Rock. And what you have to understand, Father, is that, you know, secular TV doesn't even want to hear about women who think abortion is bad. They only want to promote, you know, that the culture says that abortion is no problem. So it's for the network to give that light of day to these testimonies, the people who said, yes, I bought the lie. I committed what I thought was the unforgivable sin, but it came through healing. I'm back with the Lord. That's a message that does a few things. It first of all reaches to those who are still away from the church that there's hope, but it also reaches a girl who's considering an abortion to say, oh, maybe I don't want to go down this road. It's a dead end. Listen to these voices of truth. So the network, I know, has been instrumental in helping women come back to the church, but also helping women stop from having an abortion.
Yeah. And Father Mark, you know, in doing a program, Life on the Rock, that's oriented towards younger audience, you've done an awful lot of talking about a variety of issues, but there's been a predominance of talking about vocation issues and helping people who are, you know, young to think about a wide variety of vocations. Do you find any feedback coming to you in that regard?
About helping to encourage young people to discern? Hopefully. Yeah, we hear, you know, we get some emails and letters and things. And I think it is such a powerful witness to have. We try to have young people, those who minister to young people, but if you have a young person that's chosen religious life, that is a powerful encouragement, I think, to other young people who see that. And I like, you know, Doug Barry's presence. He couldn't be here today. He's at a conference, but you know, he witnesses to the greatness of married life. He loves his kids. He's always talking about his family, and I can testify to that. As soon as the show's over, he's on the cell phone calling his family back home. But definitely, we try to talk about chastity issues, talk about the vocation issues to help young people discern. I always like to hit at that question in the interview, how do you know? You know, and as John said, Martinoni said earlier, you know, go to your priest, talk to your priest, take their counsel, and hopefully we are making a difference in young people's lives. Yeah,
yeah. I think that's an effect because one of the things that certainly comes across is that there are so many vital, or by that I mean religious communities that are filled with vitality that you bring out and let people see that there's a joy about following a religious vocation as well as the married life. And you've done a lot of that, you know, over the years.
It is an eloquent witness to see a young person dedicating their life to Christ. And I think it catches the attention of the secular culture too. You know, when they see young people who are trying to live the gospel, trying to respond to the gospel call, I think that gives even the secular culture pause and wakes them up a little.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Father Frank, you know, one of the things that I asked earlier in the program of Mike Warsaw is, you know, about future direction. Where do you see the future direction for the programming that you're doing in Priests for Life? Where are you headed in terms of the use of this medium to help promote the life issues?
Well, of course, we have a lot of new technologies, and one of the things we've already been able to share on this network is some of the most powerful imagery of the unborn child. Not from ultrasound, we're all familiar with ultrasound, but things like embryoscopy, where you see the baby in living color, and so many people have responded to that because they say, well, how else could we, it's not something you can describe, and the network allows us to show that. I think as time goes on, we'll have even more technologies like that, but what excites me so much is the ability to have so many great experts and leaders from throughout the pro-life movement come onto this network and share what they are doing. And it introduces the movement to these people and enables then so much follow-up activity. So calls to action, calls to mobilization. It's meeting the people, but then the viewers connect with their ministries, their apostolates, and things happen as a result. All over the country, I've heard people say, oh, we started a pregnancy center after we saw that program on EWTN. We started a post-abortion healing ministry. And what is very, very gratifying, we knew whom to vote for in the election after we heard it explained on EWTN how to evaluate the candidates. We've been able, and I think as the years go on, it'll be more and more important for the network to be that vehicle whereby we can help people understand that we have to elect public servants who know the difference between serving the public and killing the public.
And you know, one of the great things about the way you do that is that this is not saying that telling people to vote for this politician or that politician. It's teaching a way of evaluation.
Well, Father, the way that we explain it, as you know, is that if tomorrow all the candidates and the parties swapped their positions on abortion, what the words of the network, the words of Priests for Life, the words of the pro-life movement would not change one iota. It would be exactly the same message. Because we're not working off the platform of a political party. We're working off the platform of the gospel of Jesus Christ as taught by the church. And that's life.
You know, I say, Father Mitch, we should be Christocrats, Christocrats.
Yeah, right.
For Christ.
One of the things that I would say is the difference is that the gospel is rock solid.
That's right.
Political platforms are silly putty.
That's right.
So, how about yourself, Janet? You know, in terms of where you see this heading with Silent No More. This is a great movement. I know some of the people in it. They're doing wonderful work. Where do you see the future use of the medium to help promote that?
Well, I know we want to keep getting more of the testimonies out there, more of the men and women who have testimonies. The other thing, Father Mitch, we're getting testimonies now of parents who said, you know, I regret taking my daughter for an abortion. And so we're reaching out now to the wider circle of victims, as we call it. Mm-hmm. So it's parents who took their a teenage child for an abortion, counselors,
sometimes younger than teenage.
Oh yes, yes, and school counselors too, who knew they give bad advice, you know, in the schools where they, you know, do you realize, Father, that in a public school setting, a school counselor can take a high school student down to the abortion clinic without their parents knowing, unless their state, of course, has parental consent, which most states don't. So we're reaching out to more of those people who now have converted and said, oh my goodness, what have I done? So they have that guilt and shame of, I'm responsible. And so we want to bring them into the campaign also and get them to healing and then have their testimonies come forward, because that also encourages other people, like I said before, who went down that road and kind of away from their faith and realized I can come back and receive forgiveness.
Father Mark, in terms of Life on the Rock, we've got about a minute or so left, but where do you see the Life on the Rock taking this move forward as you continue this program?
Well, certainly more and more young people are becoming pro-life. I think in the polls, a majority by far are pro-life. So we try to, we try to get young people. We just had a lady from Canada who does pro-life work. She's only 20 years old. Certainly we have, we get more guests like that. I think too, just preaching a solid chastity message. We have a lot of chastity speakers, serves the pro-life movement. So there's lots of strong witnesses. I like what Father Frank says, that the young people think linearly. they want to get out there and do something. And so they're very much action-oriented, and there's no trouble finding young people who are involved in the pro-life movement.
Great. All right, we want to get some more questions. Yes, ma'am, where are you from?
Birmingham, Alabama, Father.
Good to have you here, and what is your question?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to those of you that are on the stage. Each one of you, as you know who I am, I know who you are, and you've been very pivotal in my healing with Silent No More and moving forward in the pro-life movement. My question to you is, where do you see today's generation going and different things that they might be able to do to help move the movement forward and also help with getting people out to the election to actually elect the proper candidate for the presidency?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is to check with your circle of influence and seeing if they're registered to vote. Very often we assume people that we know are registered to vote, but not long ago, a very dear friend of mine I realized wasn't registered, so I said, oops, am I missing something? So very often I always say start with your circle of influence, your friends and family, and get them registered, and then inform them about the candidates, and then go from there.
And get those pieces of literature out, get people to the polls, help the homebound to fill out their absentee ballots. There's so much that's done. And as I was saying before, how EWTN unites various groups, we're starting this Vote Pro-Life Coalition, and people can get involved on the local level with the activities we'll be talking about right here on the network.
All right. All right, we have another question. Hello, where are you from?
I'm actually from all over. I move around a lot. I live in an RV. My question is...
This is one of the people we need to get to register to vote.
Yes.
Let her vote in multiple states.
Start with Chicago.
I have to catch up with that. When all the crises started happening, I'm a young adult, and I find it very appalling to see just all this crisis in the church, and it's very frustrating. And so when I actually came back to the church in my young 20s, suddenly life took a spin, and I had to stand up for my faith. And I was like, I'm a Roman Catholic, and I'm not liberal, I'm not charismatic, I'm not traditional. Well, about 2 years ago, God brought me into the Eastern Rite Church, where I experienced this amazing different charism. And now, within the last few weeks, I've been nominated with my husband to be a volunteer youth coordinator in a church, in an Eastern Rite Church. And I'm really saddened to see the loneliness that Eastern Rite children are feeling. I mean, they're not, the Roman Rite and the Eastern Rites are not as united for the youth. And I'm very passionate, and I ask, how can we change this? How can EWTN change this? Because it's so passionate to me.
Sure.
Father? You go, Father Mark.
How can we unite the churches? Well, you know, what I get excited about, what I've seen on Life on the Rock, is just the power of small groups. Just so you can bring people together. Because certainly a great commonality is just the common experience of young people. And we've had some successful youth programs on the show that brought young people together. They had a mentor, talked about real problems, had some kind of catechetical teaching, and there was a great power and strength. I think one parish in Denver had like 8 vocations that had this small groups, young people program. So
I might want to address that a little bit too, because I'm by ritual with one of the Eastern Rites, the Maronite Rite. And one of the problems has been with the Eastern Rites in that the youth groups were ways to keep the young people around to marry within the ethnic group, so that the Lebanese would find other Lebanese youth to eventually marry, and that the conventions of youth groups were ways to have those marriages done. Today, that's changing, and that marrying outside your rite and outside your ethnic group is part of Americanizing. And so I think that there might be more room to have contacts between the Eastern Rite youth groups and the Roman Rite youth groups, and maybe they can start to cooperate in that way too.
Thank you so much.
Sure. We have another question. Hello, where are you from?
New Orleans.
Wonderful city. And what's your question?
Well, I have 2 really quick questions. First, you know, Father Mitch Pacwa, you know, I feel like I have a vocation to the priesthood, you know.
Okay.
But like at the same time, the world tries to sink me in, and then I feel far from God. But so like I would just like to know how you felt your calling, and that it was your mission to become a priest, and how you faithfully fulfilled the mission.
The key for me was that I felt the call to the priesthood when I was 8 years old. Up until then, I wanted to be a cowboy. I'm still wearing the boots. But one of the greatest things was a friend of mine and I, a guy down the street from me, we would both get up and go to school before school began and attend daily mass almost every day. And getting to daily mass is a big help to a vocation because you're taking time to pray and listen to God, because you're hearing the Word of God spoken in the readings, and that it's very important to have that sense of listening to God and finding some time for personal prayer so you can listen to God too. Okay?
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
Father Frank, I met you earlier. I was wondering, like, why is abortion wrong in case of rape? Because then, like, the person, you know, who committed the sin is like, that's a demonic person. So, I mean.
Well, it's a very important question for many people, and what we have to think of this is that we are all concerned about helping that woman who's been raped. And so the question becomes, will an abortion help her? And the answer is no, the abortion hurts her even more. So now she's hurt by the rape and she's hurt by the abortion. Best thing to do is to do what's best for her and the baby together. Because of course you don't want to punish the baby for a crime the baby never committed. So both for the good of the mom and the good of the baby, you lead the person who has been raped through the appropriate counseling, through the appropriate love of the Christian community, so she'll have the courage to say yes, both to her own life and that of her child.
Okay, thank you, Father.
Thank you. Thank you. We need to take another break. I want to thank you all for being with us, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes. Thank you, and welcome back again. We have 3 new guests on, and I'd like to introduce them. First of all, Raymond Arroyo, Father Benedict Groeschel, and Marcus Grodi. And to have 3 of these real favorites of EWTN viewers. I mean, people ask about the 3 of you all the time when I'm on the road. And it's great because you not only do your programs well, but one of the things that each one of you has is a distinct history with Mother Angelica. You know, and I'd like to talk a lot about her because I'm convinced that you will not be able to write the history of Catholicism in America without including a chapter on Mother Angelica. You know, that's just the case. Father Groeschel, you've known her the longest of the 3. Give us some of your reflections on your earlier meetings with her.
Well, I was over in England giving retreats, and I got this phone call, and this lady gets on, a rather older lady, and she says, I had to make about 8 telephone calls to get to you, and I'm having a tough time. How come you were so difficult to get to? So I said, Sister, I don't know who you are. My name is Sister Angelica. Okay, well, that doesn't mean anything to me, but... what do you want? I want you to come on my program. Where is your program? And so it started with many, many questions. And I finally came down, and I remember the startling meeting of Sister. This was a real original person and someone without studying the lines, figuring out what you're going to do, just spontaneously, very impressive. And so I kept my mouth shut, which was not difficult with Mother Teresa, Mother Angelica. And I got to know her and came starting down here with very, very small operation here. And I'm still here, and I'm praying for her every day, and I hope I'll be seeing her day after tomorrow.
Marcus, how about you? When did you first get in contact with Mother?
Well, the first time that I saw her, I was still a Presbyterian pastor, 19.
Oh. You and Sam Adams came in together?
Exactly. I was still a Presbyterian pastor. It would have been about 1989. Flipping through the channels. The last thing I would have wanted to watch was Catholic television, but there it was. The first person I saw was not Mother, though. It was this monk in a gray outfit and a beard. And I was just, you know, as a Presbyterian, I really questioned whether Catholics loved Jesus. My ignorance. And I'm watching this monk just to figure out what's he going to say goofy. He talks about Jesus. And I remember thinking, wait a second, there's something wrong with this picture. Catholic television talking about Jesus. Of course, it was Father Benedict. He loved Jesus, I saw the first time. So I watched it again, and I saw Mother. How did she begin her program? Tonight we're going to talk about
Jesus.
Jesus. And when I finally got to meet Mother, 1993, during the World Youth Day time, Marilyn and I had been a Catholic for about 6 months. And I was down here for the first time filming some stuff for World Youth Day. Two things struck me about Mother in which I saw Jesus, her smile and her eyes. I mean, there was just something sincerely, deeply in love with Jesus. And to this day, I consider her a great, brave woman of faith because of her love for Jesus and her church. What a great privilege it's been to work with her in EWTN.
One of the things I wanted to ask you too is, how did you get started? She asked you to do the Coming Home show. What was on her mind when she asked you that?
I had been on John Bankovich's show talking about the Coming Home Network. And we had 4 of us talking about, as Protestant ministers coming into the church. We taped that program in July of 96. While we were taping the program, Mother's producer, Chris Harrington, said, we'd like you to be on Mother's show. Kenneth Howell and I appeared on Mother's show in December of 96. We're sharing our journeys coming into the church, and during that program, she said, I want you to come back. And I thought she meant another live show to be with her. I mean, just maybe one appearance. And then found out within a month that no. She wanted this Journey Home program. And the reason was because she heard so many letters and emails from Catholic parents whose children had left the church. And she thought if they could hear a conversion story every week, it would give them hope that if that person can come back, then maybe so can my children.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah. She did the same thing with me. It was during the middle of my first show, she said, I want you to come back and do a series. Yeah. You know, that was just the way she was. Raymond, when did you first meet Mother?
Around the same time, I think a few months before Marcus, or maybe right in the same, 1995, a friend of mine in Washington asked me if I would write a piece. I was a print journalist as well as a broadcast journalist. And he said, you know, there's this nun that has a television network, in Birmingham, Alabama. I said, oh, this is Mother Angelica. He said, oh, yeah, it's Mother Angelica. You should go down there. And I said, my mother and my grandmother, of course, women always being way ahead of us, they knew exactly who Mother Angelica was in New Orleans. They were watching her. But I lived in D.C. at the time, and they didn't have EWTN. The first time I saw EWTN, I was on assignment in Hawaii. In Kauai, in this little hotel. I remember getting there at like 11:30 at night. I go and I turn the TV on, and there's Mother Angelica. First time I'd seen her. And I ended up sitting on the edge of the bed with my unpacked bags watching this whole show, because here was this hilarious nun who was dealing directly with people. She seemed so authentic, like she, you know, she connected. And I remember just sitting at the edge of the bed watching her there. And a few months later, I was interviewing her and Bill Steltemeyer and Michael and everybody else down at EWTN doing a feature piece on Mother. And I spent, I think, 2 days. And at the end of the 2 days, I said, well, Mother, it's been fantastic. This has been a great time, and I thank you so much. And she said, well, why don't you start a little news operation for us? And I said, well, you know, yeah, that sounds great. I don't quite, you know, I'm in D.C., I'm recently married. Oh, yeah, bring her along, too. So she sends Michael Warsaw, and we had dinner, and we talked about it, and we ended up coming down to Birmingham, and I'll never forget, there was a very interesting call one night. We went to one of these congressional things, and you know, when you cover politics, you see the ugly side of democracy. And I had covered it for about 3 years at that point. I was really burned out, and I'd seen through the veneer of the beautiful Capitol and, you know, the flag waving. And I remember we came home from one event, and I was very despondent about this. And I said, why are we even covering this? I'm wasting my life on covering this stuff all the time. There's nothing here. It's the same argument year after year. It was 11 o'clock at night, and the phone rang. Hello? You ready to come down here? I said, who is this? She said, Mother. I said, this isn't my mother. Who is this? She goes, Mother Angelica. Why don't you come down here? It'll be good for your soul. So the Venus flytrap slammed shut. Here I am 15 years later.
Well, one of the questions.
Once she saw somebody she wanted, that was the end of it. You were done.
I know it. I know it. Well, one of the questions I have to ask, how long did it take you to learn to imitate her voice?
Not that long. I used to get thrown out of classes for doing this with teachers, and with Mother, you know, it was... She taught me a lot, though. She taught me so much about television, about life, about the faith, but being close to her,
if there was any one thing that she taught you about TV that you really treasure, what would that be?
My first appearance with her, which Doug talked about, I guess it was my second appearance. First one, I had laryngitis, so guess who talked most of the time? She did, which was a good lesson. Shut your mouth and listen to Mama. It's better that way. The second lesson, we did a live show together, and you know, I was because I had a journalistic background, but I also had an acting background. I was used to rehearsals, and you write out what you're going to say, you rehearse it, and then when you're ready for showtime, you have your notes, and you do the show. We get out there, I had my notes on my lap, and I'll never forget, I start, you know, I'm looking at, she says, the music is starting for her show. She said, what's that? I said, well, these are some notes, some little, you know, things here and there. Oh, let me see. Let me see. You don't need that. So now the perspiration is coming down, and I hear the music, and you know, yeah, we're going to talk about Jesus. I'm thinking, I hope he comes to help me tonight, because I'm stuck out here. I've got nothing to say. She says, and she goes, as they're about to announce her, I mean, the people are applauding, and she goes, you know what this is about? A brother talking to a sister, and a sister talking to a brother. That's all. Hello, family. Yep. And that's what happened. Yep. She taught me how to let go. And boy, did she let go every week, every night. She was amazing and remains amazing.
Father Benedict, you know, you didn't just get called by her to come and do some shows. but you've also had a lot of interaction with her in terms of, you know, some aspects of religious life, and you share a Franciscan rootedness together. Do you have any reflections on that?
Well, as the years went on, obviously it grew and it grew. The community of Franciscan sisters, which she now eventually was a member of, that developed, and in the middle of this became the, in a certain sense, a founder of the Franciscan friars who are here. And I was just, I'm saying with the brothers. And now I'm trying to figure this out. You know, how does an old nun start a community of young friars? It doesn't work. And part of the secret is she would get things started and then give it a push and let it go. You may not believe that from Mother Angelica, that she let go. But the friars there, the friars probably watching this tonight, she would get things going and give it a shove. And then you were on your own. If you said to her, well, you know, you're leaving us out here in the middle of the street, go to God, go to Christ. Don't rely on me, rely on Christ. And so, in a remarkable and apparently almost contradictory way, here is a very directive sort of person getting you going and being free to follow after Christ. And that's why it has succeeded.
Yeah. Marcus, how about you? Any things that you would say, if there was something I learned from Mother, what might that be?
Well, as I hear the three of you talking, I think whenever I go, people assume I'm with Mother all the time, and I'm not. I mean, you three have all had a much more intimate relationships with her, working relationships. I've not had that. I've always greatly felt honored to be close to her because of her great, I think, a courage and faith is something, courage to be what Christ wanted her to be and to do what Christ was calling her to do. But to reiterate something you said, Raymond, also about being in front of the camera and talking to people. We can have a written transcript that would be perfect English, or we can communicate to the people. And she said, we got to talk to the people. It was about helping them get closer to our Lord Jesus Christ, to understand His church, being vulnerable for that, laughing at yourself when you mess up. I mean, that's what,
right. That's what she did.
That's what she did. I have no television background, and I think I'm grateful to her to the rest of my life that she's willing to take a chance on the likes of us.
Right, exactly. All right. Speaking of the likes of us, we have some questions from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
Originally in New York City, but now in South Carolina.
And what is your question?
We've been working with youth lately in the past 3 years, and what we're finding is that these kids are not getting the support from obviously their parents because as far as their faith, but also from the parishes because they're afraid of running programs for fear of scandal. And these kids are in public schools, and they're really a lot of people are coming after them and going after them for their faith. And I was wondering if there was anything out there like apologetics for teens or something that we can at least arm them with when they are going to school, and so that they can defend the faith and help them develop in the faith as well.
I've been involved to some extent with youth ministry now for 35 years. I'm not as involved anymore, but I remember days back in the 70s when I was involved with youth ministry when I could go and hang out at the high school, right? You could sit and have a soda with a high school student. Today, the devil has put so many barriers in our world that it's discouraging. And so I do believe that we've got to make sure that we begin with prayer and love and helping them know the basics of the faith. It's hard when a lot of the parents don't know the basics of the faith. I'm a little hesitant to say there's a program out there because I've never found a program that's going to solve all of our problems. Mm-hmm. Because every young person in their situation is unique, a unique person for whom Jesus Christ died. And so I believe in relational evangelization. So we need to know those young people. I don't know what to say about youth work today because it is a different world than it was 20 and 30 years ago.
That's for sure. Yep. I'm afraid, you know, we're running out of time. It's, you know, this has been a really wonderful opportunity to get to meet you and to have you get to meet all of us. But also to do this program in particular has been a real blessing. That this has been a chance to take a look at where the network has been and to give you some perspective of what we think and where we think the network is going. But remember, this network never has been able to exist without you. It will never be able to exist without you. We call you family because we feel that sense of connection with you. You invite us in your homes. You let us share with you. And you share so much back with us, not only in feedback, but in our support for the network. So we want to thank you and give God's blessings to you. So thank you very much, and God bless.